complete DY Patil College of Engineering and Institution to prepare me to face the future, probably 20 years back. So it has all because of the learning which I have received from uh, the college and the platform which we got in the college. And that's how it has been cultivated, and we are here. At the same time, yes, I would certainly like to thank you, uh, Principal Sir, Dr. Vadai Sir, who has given me an opportunity and shown uh, trust on me so that I can we can do something better for the learning community altogether. Before wasting much time on these introductions, I would further like to share my screen and start with the discussion which we are planning to have. It was fantastic session since morning. I have been listening in and out in every session, and there has been a lot of learning overall. However, while in the current COVID-19 scenarios, where I pray that everybody is safe and locked down at their homes, most of the businesses have moved towards the digitalization. The people who had the mental block to move towards technology, or they have also now started adopting to the technology, and it has created a havoc surge in the digital business overall across globe. However, we operate in United States, in UK, in India also, and which has given us a fantastic learning in this last 2 months of lockdown. And you might have seen that also the digital platform, probably like Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, or AWS Chime, or Zoom for that matter, they have shown growth of more than 500% in their businesses on the consumer adaptation. And this basically gives a clear picture that this is something which is not going to change in at least upcoming years. This is probably grow or increase more towards the complete segmentation. So in today's session, we will be talking about how this applies to our learning industry. And that's where uh, we will explore multiple options on digital learning processes in this session. And I anticipate a lot of participation in this, because this is something which we all have to cultivate, as you can see in the slide. And I would also like to emphasize the learning process, whether it is an educational institute, whether it's a corporate, whether it's a student or a retail institute, wherever it is. Learning process is something which is continuous since decades. The mode has changed, but the learning has never changed. It is always continuous. As you can see, we started probably what I have learned and seen, and that's how I conclude that few decades, a few years ago, few hundred years ago, the learning process was under the trees with gurujis, with gurukuls all around, which has further evolved as compared with the changes happening in the industry, and that has a tremendous amount of impact and time, so that this creates a value chain. So it's not that the learning process has changed. The learning is same. However, the mode of imparting learning to get maximum results in optimal time is very important. And that's where the change on the segmentation in different modes have increased. And yes, we have spoken about experiential learning. We have spoken about the needs of the industry in technological disruption. But it is, I would rather say here that in addition to the experience, in addition to the disruption on technology, it's more towards di- disruption on the human adaptation for learning. And that's where digital platforms play a very important and vital role. And we'll talk a bit more about it as we move ahead. So when we talk about learning or training online or digitally, there are multiple ways. You might have, as in earlier session, we just heard about something that taking a course from Coursera will give you learning. Similarly, like Coursera, there are multiple platforms. There are Udemy's, there are videos, there is YouTube, there is Google, there is everything available. But is that optimal? is that giving you a edge to take over the application of knowledge. You're getting knowledge in all the segments. You're getting knowledge from internet, you're getting knowledge from Google, you're getting knowledge from YouTube, you're getting knowledge from Coursera, Udemy, knowledge hut, or many other platforms which are available, Moodle, many other platforms which are available in the segment. However, it's very important to assess them. It's very important for us to understand what kind of methodologies are implanted. So listening a video or reading a book will give you knowledge, but probably the application of learning is something which will make a major difference, and you need to learn how to apply your knowledge, and that's where industry will adapt all of us. And that's where these are few of most important components in the execution of learning methodologies, like synchronous learning, which basically talks about interaction over web, which we are doing right now, similar to this. However, there are challenges and it changes based on technologies. Asynchronous learning, where there are exercises, there are reading materials given to the candidates, or any social platforms where we can have instructor-led groups or self-study with subject matter experts, or blogs or wikis or different videos as we were discussing. And all of these is certainly dependent and created based on the platform we are learning. So it's very important for all of us to understand why and what works here. Because as a teacher, as a professor, and as a corporate trainer, whatever you term, when it comes to digital learning, there are two important actors which play equal role in execution or in positive or successful execution of learning process. And these two important actors are nothing but a teacher, a professor, and a student. Because if a student has opted for digital learning, it is the equal responsibility of self-discipline which a student should have to take to get that particular knowledge from the teacher, as well as from the teacher and the professor. It is the prime responsibility to teach not only student on the concepts, but also to understand what is a teacher, or what is a student absorbing from what we are teaching. So it's more of learning culture which needs to be built. So nowadays, in coming years or coming months or years or in coming decades, to be specific, a professor of an engineering college or a teacher anywhere in the school is not only a teacher. It has to be a content writer to build correct and lucrative content. It has to be a illustrator which will illustrate graphically and explain student. It has to be a good storyteller, because it's not only the concept, or it's keeping the interest of student in what you are teaching might be a cumbersome and is most important task. So handling those with the storytelling techniques which trainers or professors should have will play a very important and vital role when we plan to create a platform to deliver this globally. And this as I was hearing few questions earlier, that what will be the effect of these disruptions in education industry, and I would like to take that an example and case study in my discussion, because there are positives and negatives both. However, if we plan it optimally, for now, if you're, let's take an example of a particular ABC college. Now, this ABC college is delivering or training, or probably giving a platform to 1,000 engineers every year, passing out probably 20,000 engineers every year from that college, or some number for that, 1,000 engineers for that matter. Now, that college has a platform to train that 1,000 engineers, not only that 1,000 engineers, but up to 1 lakh or more than that also, because it is not limited to the geolocations. They can go globally. They can enroll students. Of course, there are legal bindings everywhere, and that needs to be addressed. However, the objective of learning culture or education business to grow with that objective will play a very important role. And that's where we need to build the learning culture, e-learning culture to be specific, from the teacher to the learner and to the operators and administrators overall. And that plays a very important role in creating this particular platform. Online disruption or online learning. So probably 10 years back or 15 years back, instead of Google, people or students have to read the book and then ask questions. Today, while teacher is training in the classroom, and that's where the student Googles on mobile and asks question if there is any doubt. And that has been dynamic. And that dynamicity has to be cultivated with the professors and teachers also, which basically will have not only the knowledge, but also the class handling skills, also storytelling, in creating the interest for the students, in dynamically involving them into the blended learning modes, and which will play a very important factor when it comes to e-learning. While talking about these topics, yeah, there were a few important aspects which globally with HBR and few renowned people have said on how we will be cultivating this. And you can read the code as it states that we need to bring learning to people instead of people to learning. And that's the disruption which has happened in the education industry, aligned and giving platform or giving opportunities for digital and online singing. We need to skill, we need to upskill, we need to reskill ourselves and adapt to these platforms in the changing culture. We had the learning culture of student coming to us. However, these days, this learning has to be taken to the students so that they adapt it appropriately. And there are multiple options for every student overall. And that has created a large market which was not there. There's a huge industry which has been created, tech industry, in last 8 to 10 years, which has the vision of investment in terms of money, investment in terms of time to do the research, and now it's paying off. And it's paying off not only for the time being, but for all upcoming futures. And we all, as a trainers, as a professors, as a teachers, we will have to adapt and create those cultures, evolve ourselves in telling a story. Let's say if I'm explaining a concept of uh, object-oriented programming, for that matter, let me take that, or any electronic device for that matter. It is if somebody Googles it, he can read the description and understand it in a knowledgetic way. However, if you build not case study and hands-on will come later, but before getting into case studies and hands-on, if we build a story, when I say a story, it basically is an experience which either has been taken by the professor or somebody in the industry and narrated it, which creates the interest in the students to listen before this. Because monitoring, yes, there are multiple monitoring modes, but you cannot push each and every student to listen by force, because they might be attentive physically online but not logically. Their brains might be somewhere else, and that's where we need to instigate multiple psychometric techniques, multiple storytelling techniques on every each and every content. And that's where I was saying that every teacher, every professor is now not only a professor, they have to evolve. They will have to evolve in a good storyteller. They have to evolve themselves in a good narrator of experiences. They will have to evolve in creating correct content for themselves, for the lectures they are taking, and then deliver those to the students. And that creates a fantastic impact overall. We might complain, as you can see in this code, that we complain that learners want to be spoon fed. Every teacher these days will have this problem. In सबको आसानी से सब मिल जा रहा है, but that's not what we want. We want them to hold the spoon, and for them to hold the spoon, they need to understand why they should hold the spoon. We are just pushing lot of knowledge to the students, to the learners, or to the industry, to be specific. And that's where this complaint comes in. And we will have to realign our thoughts, wherein in addition to imparting knowledges, we will also have to gauge and apply it to student, that he or she has to adapt to the knowledge, to the food which has been have held to them. And that's a very fantastic and a global quote which plays a very important role overall. One more colleague of mine, Kathy Moore, who is a fantastic contributor globally in an e-learning community, says that the most important principle for designing lively e-learning is to see e-learning design not as information design, but as designing an experience. And that's what something which I was talking about. We have lot of content available for every student, for every professor, for every faculty. But the change or the key differentiator for you to scale up will be how you give the narration, how you give the experience digitally to every student. There was one more fantastic quote. I'm just trying to explain multiple aspects with the good statements on this e-learning community or online community. When I say e-learning, it talks about online, it talks about mobile, it talks about all the possible ways with which these learnings can be imparted. As stated here, e-learning doesn't just happen. It requires careful planning and implementation. So it's correctly stated. It doesn't mean that you buy a platform and start taking lectures. That's not the way, or probably that's the way which will fail in giving correct results. It will not fail in execution, but it will fail in giving correct results. Output will not be as expected. And that's where it requires a lot of time and investment in planning and implementation the complete online learning strategy. And Henry Ford, the famous quote by Henry Ford, everybody might be aware of it. The only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them, having them stay. Which also says that the training or the learning opportunities are not going down; it are increasing. The of modus of operandi is changing, and we will have to create appropriate skilled segments which will create a difference in this community, and this will play a very important role. This means that every organization needs skilled people, skilled students, skilled employees. How are they going to skill them? Either by from the institutions or from the corporates, and both of them have to manage their skills appropriately. And this also creates a large amount of industry for every professor, for every teacher to get acquainted on what and how it has to be planned. There's one more trainer and speaker, Jane Bozat, with whom we are working in United States for multiple US universities, who has written a fantastic content on specifying the need or understanding the need of the teaching skills. And it states that learning and teaching are not inherently linked. Much learning takes place without teaching, and indeed, much teaching takes place without learning. That's a very nurtured statement. There is a lot of difference between learning and teaching, and it they are not same. That works well with every segments. If a student has desire to learn, it doesn't need teaching. He will learn of his own. However, without learning, a teacher can teach. That also plays a very important segment in the lives of faculties, in lives of professors. And that's why it helps. It is very important for us to understand the online learning effectiveness, which needs to be measured, which needs to measure not only in terms of reports or analytics in terms of pie chart or graph chart, but what has been the outcome also. And that basically can be done with set of implementation steps which will happen in the segment. Now these implementation steps can start with pre-assessment. Now what is pre-assessment? Before starting a class, let's say a professor decides of teaching a subject in electronics and telecommunication for a third year student. Now before these days, as you all are more experienced in terms of academics than me, but I would like to emphasize here is these days, before taking a lecture, students might have read or Googled something on that particular topic. So it's very important to plan your sessions accordingly. And now to plan that sessions, what can be done? Let's say I'm scheduled to deliver a training on data science next week. Now, what I can do is probably I can create a questionnaire of 15 to 20 questions where I can ask that basically creates interest of every student to learn and apply their skills, to apply their knowledge. Instructional designing will also play an important role, as I was saying, that professors now have to learn the content writing or creation, and that's where instructional skills come into the picture. That's where the interactivity, the gamification, the techniques like assessments will play an important role. So people often tout interactivity as great benefit offered by e-learning, but what does interactivity mean? It is not about talking, it's not about asking questions, it's not about presenting. It is basically about involving them into the learning process. And that basically creates a lot of effectiveness in the programs which we deliver. Dr. Michael also said that we don't care what people know, we care what they do. It all about, I will reiterate this, it's all about performance in individuals. When they know how and where to apply their skills, we are teaching them skills, but if we don't involve them in the application of it, it will tremendously impact us. With this, I would.
This was very fruitful session, sir. First of all, it's the most light concept is of two actors. Yes, sir, indeed. We both are the actors on the education platform. Principal, sir, should I take questions?
Yeah, please take.
Yes, sir. Sir, one question is there. You just told us that complete online learning, teaching learning is possible, but it is difficult in practical and experimental sessions for the students like mechanical, production, civil. So as per you, what do you suggest us? How we can overcome this problem?
So this, as I said, it is basically when it comes to non-technical domains, like as you rightly said, mechanical, civil, production, electronics, it is more on what they could production, electronics. It is more on what they could visualize. So as you know that visualization will play a very important role, and that's where I said instructional design of will play an important role. So when you build a content, it is very important for you as a professor to educate student in terms of visualized mode, and that visualization might not be a presentation, that has to be a appropriate instructional design which will actually help student to adapt the knowledge. It is like in tech, in IT or com, probably you can share screen and do demos or practicals. However, in mechanical, production and civil, you cannot do that. However, it will also help these people to adapt to the learning segments when we create these instructional designing skills in the professors, which will create interest on students also.
Yes, sir. Should I go for next question, sir?
Yes, please.
The question is from Pramod Ubade. Without any effort, students are adopting education through digital learning. This is full digitization in learning process. Is healthy for students or not?
Okay. I will like to explain it into two different segments. Let us first talk about the full digital learning. So what students, so let's say if you are a professor on uh, probably object oriented programming or programming concepts, now these skills which a student gets from the digital learning platforms, I would say Google or Udemy or any other platforms for that matter, or Coursera for that matter, these will basically create the awareness of those topics. However, as I said, application will be more important, and that should be the skill of professor, which should be cultivated to tell them on where they can apply the resources. As I said in my presentation also, there are lot of resources and you cannot judge or you cannot tell that this resource is right or this resource is wrong. Let that be there, let that digital description of learning be there. However, as a professor, as a teacher, your responsibility would be to impart skills on how to apply it, and that will create respect as well as interest towards the professor from all the students.
Yes, sir. Next question is from Shanti Guru Madam. How to prevent students turning to reproductive recipients by e-learning?
So there are cybersecurity measures to do it, and that's possible. It's just we will have to discuss and define the boundaries and protocols. With the help of those, we can employ cybersecurity techniques, which will help in doing this.
Okay. Thank
So
you, sir.
these days, you might have heard of blockchain, which is a fantastic method to avoid these conflicts. There are frameworks with it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Principal, sir.
Yeah, Amit, Andre, wonderful expression of your really reflective process as far as this various teaching methodology, synchronous, asynchronous, instruction-led, then video, stream-based, web-based, the content generation necessity, and the various experiential learning that you would like to bring it to the student so that the human get adapted to the various kind of the learning. You have exemplified with the various quotes on the learning and aligned to this particular topic of education 4.0. Even in spite you being the technologist, scientist, data scientist, as well as the experts into AI, ML, you have given these talks and really it's a great. Answering to some of the important questions which is there, how the practical, as far as the civil engineering, mechanical engineering, such kind of or the practical in terms of the medical cases, which are those technology in the industry 4.0 will be helping. Amit, with your due permission, I would like to respond on your behalf.
Sure.
So perhaps augmented reality and virtual reality, this is the perfect solution, perhaps nearing to the practical, and then naturally they have to build their own experimental or project-based learning. They have to do it ultimately. So only digital environment cannot solve the problems completely, but there should be a hybrid kind of the learning apart from this ICT-enabled learning. This, I think that this is the approach that what we expect. And thank you very much, Amit, for being with us, for great expression of your thinking about the learning practices, specifically onto the digital platform, maybe your roller coaster model, or maybe a COPE cycle for the experiential learning. So thank you very much. Arti?